Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we explore a real-world controversy. I often turn to thought leaders working from the inside on these hot topics. Today, that thought leader is Gena Cox, an organizational psychologist and executive coach. She's here for the case file I call Are You Ready? Those letters, R.E.D.I, are a play on the common DEI you hear covering diversity, equity, and inclusion. Gena, DEI has gotten a lot of attention since the social awakening of May 2020. Corporations rushed to implicit bias training, hiring diversity officers, as well as more employees of color. None of those things are wrong in and of themselves, but you would prefer we have a different framing, especially now that many things DEI are taking a hit.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Yeah, I watched all of that activity, well-intentioned activity, because I think people want positive outcomes from the work that they do. But it was a little bit sort of misdirected, because the reality is that inclusion tops diversity. And so for many of the solutions that organizations were guided to do first and to sustain over the last few years, they had sort of failed to focus on the one thing that mattered most, which was to make sure that the day-to-day experience of any employee in an organization was positive. Because when you put diversity ahead of that, what happens is you have people who walk into an organization, and I like to say it feels like being the 11th invitee to a 10-person dinner party. There's no place setting for you. Nobody knows what to do. You seem out of place. And so it would have been better and more effective had organizations from the very beginning focused first on inclusion.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Let's talk about your acronym, which I just love, R.E.D.I, R-E-D-I. I love the word, the R, what that stands for. Describe to people why, for you, it's R-E.D.I.
Yeah, well, first of all, by law, I think you must have an acronym if you're doing any kind of organizational consulting. And so I provided one. But people know what DE&I stand for. Whether you agree with it or like it or not, the reality is that those concepts, diversity, equity, and inclusion do matter. However, in order to lay that foundation of inclusion that I talk about, it is really necessary to understand what is the outcome that people who have traditionally been underrepresented in organizations say they really desire. And that outcome is respect, a concept that we've all heard since we were children, but didn't necessarily understand. And so my little acronym just puts R in front of all the other letters, because until respect is present in these organizations, none of those other letters in the alphabet soup, equity, diversity, and inclusion, will be possible or sustainable. And respect matters that much because respect really directly impacts outcomes such as employee retention, burnout, and satisfaction, things that all organizational leaders would say are important. But respect matters even more to people from underrepresented groups, especially indigenous groups in the United States context, certainly people of color. And that's also true across the world, by the way.
You also talk about, and respect is so important, you talk about how it's so connected to that feeling of belonging. And I think this happens in social settings, definitely in workplace settings. If you don't feel like you belong in that workplace, in that organization, it is really hard to be productive. It's really hard to think about a long-term career.
And, when I think about respect, I think about the three elements that define it, at least as far as the research that I have done. And all three of these elements must be present to have that feeling that you're describing. Employees need to feel seen, they need to feel heard, and they need to feel valued. And being seen is not literally, it's not just, of course, visually being seen. It also has to do with this notion of acknowledgement of a person's presence and their humanity, because respect is, differs from civility in that it's not just about, are you doing the interpersonal niceties, but do I get the sense from interacting with you that you recognize me as a human, sort of a unique human in the space in which we're operating. So that's sort of the bit that has to do with feeling seen. And sometimes leaders and colleagues don't do very well with that. Being heard has to do with having space for your ideas then getting credit for those ideas and feeling like in putting forward your opinions, your ideas, that you're having an impact on this organization of which you are a part, regardless of whether you work in the most lowly job in the organization or you're at a much higher level at the very top of it. So being heard. And then being valued. Being valued is a tricky one because organizations will, of course, pay people for the work that they do, compensation. But being valued is more about recognition and recognition for the contributions that you uniquely make, allowing you to have space to sort of take advantage of the currency of organizational life, things like promotions and jobs where you can get the kind of visibility that only certain kinds of jobs provide. And so if you're shut out of those opportunities and you're only ever in certain kinds of roles, as a group, certainly, you begin to recognize that you're not really being valued in the organization. So respect matters that much. And I define it in that way, just to give leaders something that they can remember so that they don't miss one of those critical ingredients.
Right. We really have nothing if we have no respect, because respect is so interconnected to trust. And I love your three: being seen, being heard, being valued. And my sense is when those three are in place, you're going to be in a culture, whether it's your neighborhood, your church or place of worship, your workplace. Talk a little bit about culture and what should people be looking for. Let's say they're in that job interview. You don't know what the culture is like. Or is there a way to find out what the culture is like before you take a job?
Yeah, because respect and inclusion matters so much to all of us. It really is worth the effort to put a little bit of effort into the research about this. So most of us think very long and hard about, understanding the financial situation of an organization, studying who the leaders are, getting a sense of the hierarchy in the organization. Those kinds of things are essential. But we ought to also add this additional element where we think a little bit more or learn a little bit more about the cultural norms in an organization. In interviews, for example, when I have been interviewing for jobs, which I haven't done a lot recently because of the work that I do today, but I still guide other people in this area. I always say, remember that when you're interviewing, your job is to get as much information that you can have to help you figure out if this is the right decision for you. It's not necessarily that you're in this interview just to help the organization understand if you have the right skills, knowledge, and abilities for the job. We tend to over-index on that. And so in that effort, what you're looking for is before you even meet with the hiring manager, you're looking for at all points in your interactions with the organization, even starting with the website, what are the signs and signals about how the organization operates? When you ask someone a simple question as part of the interview process, do they answer the question or they try to, sort of skirt that question? Listen very carefully as well to how people with whom you interview talk about their colleagues. This is a key indicator of what's going on. So if you get the sense, for example, that the recruiter is trying to bring you into an organization but can't answer fundamental questions, and then when you ask, say, I needed to get that from the hiring manager, but they haven't gotten back to me, or I'll see what I can do and try to get that for you in a couple of days, and you never hear anything. That is often an indication that the recruiter in the HR department doesn't really have much influence on the way things are done. And that
sounds like a red flag, actually.
It is. It is a red flag. Absolutely. And so I guess the basic rule is just pay closer attention to the interpersonal aspects of your interaction with an organization.
Great advice, and really important to go with your own set of questions. And as I like to say, do that audience analysis during. So you're communicating and you might be in your brain thinking about what's a question I can ask them based on what they've just said to me. Thanks, Gena, for helping us look at this topic in a new way. For more Gena, go to GenaCox.com. Today's Crisis Brief is brought to you by Goff Public. Number 1, respect is fundamental. Without respect, the other elements of DE&I aren't possible or sustainable. Number 2, do your homework to discover the culture of an organization while considering a new job. Number 3, pay attention to interactions you have. These are key clues about any workplace. Reputation issues can arise quickly and unexpectedly. Prepare and plan before a crisis strikes with Goff Public, an award-winning public relations and public affairs agency. Your best defense is a crisis-ready culture that helps you spot potential issues, act swiftly, and reflects your brand's values while building trust with your audiences. Learn more at golfpublic.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Go to our website, thecrisisfiles.com, to catch up on all case files in one easy spot. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.